It's 2 o'clock in some places, 11 o'clock other places, but welcome. Glad you could join us today. We are going to be talking about the STEPs program, and I'm happy to be your host today. There I am on the screen. I coordinate the STEPs program, and I'm going to be spending a little bit of time talking about the program. If you have questions, put them in the chat box. I may get to some of them as we go along. If not, then we will answer them at the end. So TJ is going to be helping me keep track of the questions, and she'll be putting them over in our parking lot so that I can watch them as they come in and we can answer them when we get to them. So welcome to the webinar. I think that that's a question that we have to ask ourselves frequently. We all have so many things we want to do and feel like we should be doing, particularly when it comes to collections care and educational programming. Fundraising's a biggie, isn't it? All of these things are so critical, but assessing where your institution is and where it wants and needs to go in terms of its vision and its sustainability is also very important. And one of the best ways to make sure that it happens is to build assessment into your daily work. Programs like STEPs offer a pathway, or I like to think of it as like a roadmap to years spinning our wheels, trying to find our way, or perhaps, unfortunately, never finding our way. Trust, accountability, and high standards of practice are critical for museums. That's what our communities expect of us. And AASLH is committed to helping history museums and historic sites and houses meet those expectations and be active and fully engaged institutions in their communities. And many of our communities are rapidly changing. Let's face it, in a world that is rapidly changing. Or maybe your community isn't changing, and that can be an issue too. So how do our museums anchor those communities? Or maybe you are a board member. You know that board members frequently represent professions like accounting, law, banking, restaurants, government, medicine, just to name a few. These are all fields that have standards. So board members are often very familiar and comfortable with the idea of assessment programs and standards. STEPs is the entry-level program that helps you see that many of the things that you do every day in your work as either a paid or unpaid staff member, board member, volunteer, whatever it is with your institution, these things are all connected on a daily basis with standards. So what is the STEPs program? It's the Standards and Excellence Program for history organizations, and it is a self-paced assessment program that's open to any museum or historical society, site, historic house, whatever it is. It's an entry-level program, as I mentioned earlier. It's in larger institutions will find the program helpful also. If your institution's been through a MAP assessment already, STEPs can be a good refresher. It can also be helpful in training entry-level staff, volunteers, interns. With the STEPs program, we have, for the very first time, we have specific recommendations for what history organizations can do in order to improve and begin meeting national standards. And these recommendations, they're called performance indicators, and they help to answer the question, how do we know when an organization is meeting a standard? And I'm going to show you some examples in just a moment. But I want to pull a poll question over here just to take a quick gauge of the audience. And let's see if I can get this to pull over here in the center. Let's hear from all of you. Has your organization previously taken part in any assessment program like MAP, CAP, or STEPs? Let's just get a quick gauge. And a number of people, about almost 15%, say they're not sure, and that's very common, that you're not sure what went on at your institution prior to your arrival. But it looks like just over 50% in the audience have not taken part in any assessment programs, and there are 35% of you who have. So we have a good variety in the audience, and I'm going to I'll pull that poll back over and we'll keep going. So we do have a mixture. We have some people who are familiar with assessment programs and some that have not taken part in them before. Let's see, let's move on to the next slide. So STEPs was developed, it's now in its 4th year, but we spent about 4.5 years developing the program. It was a grassroots effort by the field for the field. We had a lot of help from people. We had 47 test sites from across the country, located in Mississippi all the way up to Minnesota. So we had a great group of pilot sites that helped us. And as I mentioned, this was a program that was developed by the field to help small and mid-sized organizations. So how can STEPs help your organization? My way of summarizing all of the valuable benefits is that by connecting your organization's planning, decision-making, and fundraising to National Museum standards, you gain credibility. Funders like to know that your plans are based on something that can be substantiated, that your progress can be measured, that you're connected with some type of program that's helping you to achieve your vision. And you have a much easier time articulating your goals and your successes when you can connect them to some type of benchmarks or standards that other museums around the country, including small museums, that they are also striving for. But I think one of the most valuable one is moving in the same direction, using the same roadmap toward one common set of goals. And I know from my own experience working in a county historical society, this can be critical. Trying to, as we often say, it's like herding cats sometimes, trying to get everyone moving in the same direction. It can be very difficult. You can be off in 10 different directions. You can have too many cooks spoiling the broth. And STEPs is a way to bring everyone together, moving in the same direction. The workbook is at the core of the STEPs program. And it's an easy to use spiral bound book that has lots of space for you to write in as your committees or your board or individual staff members work through the self-study questions and make notes. And you can see here on the screen, there's 6 sections to the book, starting with mission, vision, and governance and ending with management. You can address those sections in any order you want. If you don't have any historic structures or landscapes, you don't have to address that section that you want. A nice benefit of the workbook is that it documents your organization's progress, which, as you all know, can be really valuable when there are transitions in paid and unpaid staff and board members and others. And so the book helps you to keep track of which performance indicators your organization has already checked off, indicating that it's meeting those. And when you enroll in the program, you also get access to the electronic version of the workbook, so you can share sections with lots of different people within your organization. So here's a sample that I want to show you from, this is the mission, vision, and governance section. You can see over on the far left the standard, and you can see, I won't read it, it says the institution has a clear understanding, on and on and on. It's a very broad statement. You can see that it would be difficult for an organization to figure out, well, what do we need to do to meet that standard? It's so broad. We need to have a clear understanding of our mission and communicate why it exists. So what we've done in the STEPs program, and as I mentioned, it's never been done before, so this is all new for our field. We had all of those volunteers help us come up with self-assessment questions and performance indicators. So basic, good, and better performance indicators. And so you check off the boxes of which ones you are meeting. The ones that your organization is not able to check off, you can go over to the other side of the right-hand side of the spiral-bound notebook, and there are columns for you to make notes on what you might do to try and meet the good and better indicators. And I can tell you that we know from experience that not every organization is going to get to the better level in every section. And I always say that's okay. You do what your organization is capable of doing, what it's capable of reaching. And so what you can't check off today, you put over on the other side, and you try and work toward it. Some things you might reach and some things you might not. We have a lot, so you do what you can. But the workbook makes it easy for you to keep track of what you're doing and what you might be able to achieve. And then you can easily take those things, those notes you've written on the right-hand side of the book, and use them for long-range planning. Or if you just have a set of goals that your museum tries to reach each year, it's very easy to transfer this information into your future planning. So here's another example. This is from the collections section. And again, we have on the left side, we have a very broad standard. And I will tell you that this is the most lengthy standard in the entire program. Here's 2 self-assessment questions that I'm giving you as an example. And again, the basic, good, and better performance indicators for you to check off. I want to do another quick poll. I like polls because I think they're fun and kind of helps to give me some feedback. So let me move this one over. Here we are. How familiar are you with National Museum standards? Let's get a quick check, because I will tell you that when I started in the field, I didn't know anything about standards, and we didn't really talk about them. They weren't really promoted in the field. And I'm not going to tell you how long I've been in the field. Maybe we didn't have standards then. I don't know. But I think standards, I think our field's been pretty silent on standards for a long time. And hopefully STEPs will help us to make more museums aware of them. So we've got about 50% or slightly. We've got more than a third are familiar with them. Oh, we do have a couple of museum standards geeks. That's great. I kind of like to think of myself as a standards geek now because I kind of live standards. I'm going to pull that back because I want to show you now. I'm going to go to the next slide. And I want to show you 2 different ways you can go through the STEPs program. When we put the program together, we really only envisioned one way, and that was, as I mentioned earlier, you choose a section like collections, and you start working down through the program. You check off the indicators that you can meet and work on those you can't. So I call that the vertical way of going down through the book, section by section. But there's another way to go through the book. And this way is, ta-da, what I call the horizontal way. This is where you look only at the basic performance indicators across all 6 sections, or at least all the sections that apply to your institution. And so you don't even worry about the good or the better. And I think it works well for a lot of organizations. They don't get overwhelmed by going through and looking at the good and better. They only look at the basic. And if a museum does not have a collections management policy, and they're choosing to go through the program in the first way I told you, in the vertical way. Let's say that they don't choose the collections section for a couple of years. Maybe it takes them several years to get through management and mission, vision, and governance and interpretation. And it takes them several years before they actually are made aware that they need a collections management policy. And so going through the horizontal way will kind of raise that red flag to them early on in the process, so that that's a policy that they get drafted and adopted early on, so that then they're meeting the basic performance indicators. It can ease the anxiety level. It can help everyone to just focus on the basic, and you can get 6 bronze certificates, which I'll talk about in just a minute, and then be motivated to move on to the next ones. Let's see, I see a question I'll answer real quick. It says, we've referred to museums several times. Does this program apply equally to archives? Yes, it does. Or libraries, Bruce asked. Yes, I kind of use museums in the generic sense in terms of organizations, museums. This program can help all of these types of institutions because, again, we all have management issues. We have the libraries and archives have collections issues, mission, vision, and governance, audience. So the great thing, as I mentioned earlier, the program is flexible. Use what you need. If it doesn't apply to you, then in your workbook, I say cross it out. And you write, doesn't apply to us. It's a self-study program, and I'm going to be talking more about that in just a minute. We don't come back and check and say, oh, well, you know, you didn't do this organization. And whether you're a library, archives, I've even had other nonprofits say that they want to at least use the program for the governance issues and the management issues, even if they don't have collections. They still feel that those sections apply to them. So great questions. And I apologize if I don't use more descriptive words than museum. It's kind of one that I fall back on, but it does apply to all different types of organizations. So a lot of times I hear from organizations that say, we just don't have the money right now to work on STEPs. And I try and explain to them that you don't have to have a lot of money to work on. They're not about money. They're not about spending money, except for maybe the paper that the policies are printed on. Many of the suggested changes in STEPs have much more to do with communication and consensus building. And we all know that can be a you know, a tough row to hoe sometimes. Just communicating and building consensus when you're working on policies and procedures. So you know, I don't want to make it sound like it's, you know, simple because it doesn't take money, because we all know communication can be difficult, but you don't have to have a lot of money to get started in STEPs. Or you might have to make the determination that they're just not feasible at this time. If a performance indicator is addressing issues like using archival collection supplies, and you might have to go at that in phases. Perhaps you're able to buy, you know, a couple hundred acid-free file folders to use with your documents and your letters and other correspondence, and you may not be able to do it all in one fell swoop, but you can at least get started and at least know what's ahead of you in terms of what you can do and what you can be striving for. We understand that, as I mentioned earlier, not every organization is going to get to the gold level in every part of the workbook. Desirable than trying to find my way in the dark and not knowing, well, are we doing things right? Is this what we should be doing? How are you supposed to do this or that? At least you have with STEPs, you have a roadmap that helps you to see what you can achieve, what you can shoot for, and possibly what you may never achieve. We hope that everyone would get to the gold level, but realistically, we know it's not possible. You have restrictions. You have things that just aren't possible with a historic structure that you might be housed in. Shoestring budgets are, a very commonplace thing today. A lot of it does come down to money in terms of things that you can purchase, but you can at least get started with a lot of the policies and the practices. So I want to do a quick audience poll, and let's just type it into the chat box. Can you think of something that you could do, an improvement you could start working on today that doesn't involve any money? I'll have to watch the chat box. It's starting to roll pretty fast. Orientation policy. Oh, for the board. Very good, Krista. That's one that is important. Core documents, volunteer training, emergency plans. Lots of great ideas here. Deaccession and accession policy, board development. See, these are all the types of things that many of you are already working on every day. And as I said, STEPs just builds the structure around it so that you really have a checkbox you were able to check off. And so it just places that structure around what you do and what you'd like to be working on. So I see some more things like a volunteer handbook, processes and procedures, always important. Realignment of children's activities, that's another good one with the interpretation section. So you all have a great idea. You have great ideas, and I think you understand completely what I'm talking about. So let's move on, because everyone always wants to know, how much does it cost? STEPs enrollment, and it is a program for organizations. It's Ricky, I am glad you have that problem and not me. So, because I'm not an alligator lover. But let's get back to the enrollment. One-time fee of $175. There is no application to fill out. We don't have eligibility requirements. There are no deadlines for either enrolling or completing the program. So the $175 fee is a one-time enrollment fee. It doesn't matter if you're in the program 2 years or 10 years, you pay the fee one time. If you're not a current institutional member of AASLH, you do need to purchase an institution. As I mentioned earlier, you also get access to the electronic version. You also get access to the STEPs community website, and that community has a wide variety of sample forms and policies, job descriptions, lots of other documents. You also have access to lots of free webinar recordings in the community. And you also get access to the discussion sites, the discussion list, where you can talk with other folks whose museums are enrolled in STEPs. There's also the opportunity to earn the bronze, silver, and gold certificates. And those certificates correlate to the basic good collection section. Then you fill out the form at the back of that section of the workbook, and you mail it to AASLH. And Terry Jackson will then send you the bronze certificate. You have to keep up your institutional membership if you want to be eligible for the certificates. Those certificates are on the honor system. As I mentioned earlier, STEPs is a self-study program. It's like a correspondence course. We are not able to check and when all of those folks were helping us set up the program, most of them agreed that creating a program that would rely on someone, even volunteers, helping us to review all those documents was just not feasible. And so it is on the honor system. And you do have to understand that those certificates that you get, they are certificates. They are not a certification. They're certificates that say that you reported to us that you're meeting the performance indicators to earn you a bronze, a silver, or a gold certificate. What we like to think is that when you finish, or at least when you're partially through the STEPs program, that consultation. And so we like to think that the MAP program is kind of like the peer review for STEPs. We've worked closely with AAM to develop the STEPs program, and they also think that MAP is a nice peer review next step after STEPs. So keep that in mind. Let's see, you also get, for your benefits, you get this wonderful little decal. You can see it there on the screen. You get a decal to put on your front door. You get discounts on technical leaflets and other workshops that AASLH offers. And I want to go back to the certificates, the bronze, silver, and gold certificates. And I want to tell you that back right out, not to quote Charlene, because she called me, or maybe I called her, I can't remember, to talk about when they got their first gold certificate. And they did a wonderful press release that they were the first organization in Texas to get a gold certificate in STEPs. But one of the things that I remember her telling me that I have not forgotten was that she had several of her board members come up to her the day that they got the certificate in the mail and tell her that going through the STEPs program really helped them to understand what she did as a director. And as one of them said to her, "Now I understand why you nag us about reviewing all of these policies and procedures." So her board of directors became more aware of not only what Charlene did on a day-to-day basis, but what their role was in being board members. And she also said to me too, that when you start getting your certificates, make a big deal out of it. Celebrate with your board or your staff, your volunteers. Have cupcakes, have chocolate candy, whatever it is. But, pat each other on the back. And it can go a long way in motivating people to want to have the museum continue earning more certificates. I'm looking at a couple of questions here I'm trying to, let's see, have one that you had someone said they received a rather harsh CAP assessment and you need something like STEPs to give you a roadmap. And I think that's great. I think that STEPs can be a really good supplement to a CAP report, a MAP report, and coordinated by Heritage Preservation, and it's where they send a conservator out to your site. So STEPs, it's exactly what we had hoped that STEPs would be, and that it is an entry-level program to get you started on the right foot, to then get ready, if you so choose, to move on to MAP and CAP and those other things, those other programs. So quick slide here. Enrollment by state. We currently have about 530 organizations enrolled in STEPs, and maybe you see your state up on the screen right now. Washington State is our #1 state right now, and I can tell you that several states that are on this list, Washington State, Connecticut, Pennsylvania, Tennessee, Minnesota, these states all have some type of funding mechanism in place for a program like the one in Minnesota. They have the legacy grant programs where not only can you apply for the money to cover enrollment and membership in AASLH, but Minnesota also offers funding for a consultant to help you move quickly through the program. Minnesota Historical Society, they're encouraging museums to try and get through STEPs as quickly as they can, and so they'll give you funding for a consultant. Connecticut, the Connecticut Humanities, they have a program going right now where they're taking 25 museums through STEPs. And I think that program is winding down, and they've been through almost all of the sections now. So you might think about talking with the Humanities Council in your state. Maybe there's possible funding. Washington State, many of their enrollments are funded, very generous in funding enrollment for many of the 51 participants from Washington State. So there are opportunities out there, and I encourage you to talk about it in your state and see if there might be a way to, if not funding, then just find if there's been a group that's been started. I really encourage STEPs users in every state to kind of band together. It can be very beneficial, as you know, to work in a group. And you can share resources, you can network with each other, you can be accountable so you stay on task. And the one thing about STEPs is there's a lot of times your organization might have to stop and start STEPs. Perhaps you've got to stop because everyone has to focus on school tour season, or maybe you have a big fundraiser coming up and you have to stop. But getting back started in STEPs again after you take a little bit of a hiatus can be difficult, so that you don't lose any more time than's necessary when you do have to take some time off. You can ask your state museum association if your group can have a roundtable at the annual state meeting. Perhaps your state association might be willing to include all the certificate recipients in a luncheon, maybe, or recognize them in the state association's newsletter. There's all sorts of things that you can do to get a group started in your state that doesn't require money. At least get your group talking. And we do have on the STEPs community website, there's a way for you to have a state group within your state that you all can communicate via the STEPs community. So we're happy to have this. All I have for my formal presentation, but now I want to answer questions, see what some of you, if you've got questions, if you have ideas. I see someone asked if there's a funding mechanism in Tennessee, and maybe TJ already answered that. The Middle Tennessee Community Foundation, we applied, Bethany Hawkins at AASLH applied to Middle Tennessee Community Foundation for a small grant to fund, I think it's like 5 museums go through, and we're on our 2nd grant with them, and I think we've applied for a 3rd one. And Bethany works with this group of 5 museums in Tennessee to take them through the program. And Linda's asking me, does Texas does not have any funding mechanisms, but I can tell you, I know that they would be happy to work with a group. They help to spread the word about STEPs all the time in your state. So there may be a possibility for some type of funding mechanism in Texas. Georgia, I've not heard about anything in Georgia or South Carolina. I'd love to work with you all to come up with something. New Mexico, Karen, there's not been a lot of interest yet in STEPs in New Mexico. Every state has at least one museum or organization enrolled in STEPs, but some of them only have a few, and I think New Mexico is one of those that only has a few. So anything you can do, Karen, to spread the word in New Mexico, I would really appreciate it. And Carrie's asking if you can get a copy of the webinar. Starting probably, I would say, look early next week, look and see on the AASLH website. There should be a link to this webinar, and you can watch the recording with your board. And I've just posted up here, there's also a short video. It's just under 4 minutes. A short video we've just done that if you're wanting to show something to your board of directors that's quick, informative, it's fast-paced, you want to show them what STEPs is about, go to that link and you can show them the short video. Let's see, I'm going to scroll back through and see if we have other questions that have come up that I might have missed. And TJ, you can alert me to anything if I missed. Oh, Greg is asking, a previous director signed us up in 2010 and nothing was done. Has there been an update since then that we should be adding to our workbook? No, there haven't been any updates. We decided when we developed the program we would not make any updates. We didn't really want to come back and say, oh, well, here, folks, there's another 10 standard, the few corrections to it, but no updates. And Greg, if you need access to the electronic copy of the workbook, let me know and we'll get that for you. Let's see, what else is there? Let me go back down and see if anybody's... I do ask that you take a few minutes at the end of today's webinar and complete our short survey. You'll see the link on the screen. We'd love to hear from you what you'd like to see in future webinars and how your webinar experience today was. So please don't forget to fill out that short survey before you leave us today. And as I mentioned, you can watch the recording of the webinar. The link will be on our website next week. And we also have a number of other really good webinar planning, audience development, and they're all in the STEPs community, and you can watch them. You can watch them from home. You can watch them from work. You can get a group together. And so that's one of the benefits of being in the STEPs program. Is there a way to order just the workbook? Tara, that's a great question. You can just order the workbook, yes, from our bookstore on our website, AASLH.org. Go to the bookstore and you can order it, but do keep in mind that if you order the workbook alone, you're not eligible for the certificates and you don't get access to the STEPs community. So, but it is out there, and we do have, or some organizations that purchase it. We do have some public history and museum studies programs. And Ricky asks, you're not sure how to begin in the program. My best advice is just dive in, choose a section. You might need to talk with others at your site to see if they want you to answer the performance indicators by yourself, or if they want you to put a committee together. And but I would say just jump in and try out one of the sections. And the workbook does have a really good comprehensive section called How to Use This Workbook. And so it does take you through a recommended step-by-step process. Kelly from Wisconsin is asking, as you're planning to move from your organization, would this be a great way to prepare the organization for your departure? Yeah, I think it would help them to. So yes, I think that's a great idea. Looking to see if there's any other questions. Let's see. Oh, and it just occurred to me, another set of organizations that are doing some funding of sites are some of the national heritage areas. I know the Freedom's Frontier group out of Lawrence, Kansas, I think it is. They have a funding mechanism for some sites, and some of the other national heritage areas have expressed interest in pulling together a group of STEPs participants. So, if any of you are in a national heritage area, you might inquire about that about possibly doing a group project. I always like to give the example from Delaware. Now I'm probably not going to get their name right. It's the Delaware Department of Cultural and Historical Affairs, I think. Um, they actually went through StEPs early on in the program, and it was either 4 or 5 sites, and they did a very interesting project. They decided they were not going to check off the performance indicators unless all of the museums within their agency, which, granted it's small, there were either 4 or 5. It's not like some of the other state agencies that have lots and lots of historic sites, but they actually took everyone through together, and everyone got their certificate. They actually, I think if I'm remembering right, they actually did it like the Olympics, where they awarded the certificates with the Olympic music and all of the ceremony and everything, and they had a lot of fun doing it. So I would encourage you to use STEPs as a motivational tool with your organization. Linda's asking, she's a museum of one, will she be able to tackle this alone? Absolutely. And I think it can really help you to focus on what needs to be done, especially when you're a staff of one. I know, a lot of times we can spend our days putting out that on Thursday mornings and Monday and Thursday mornings you're going to work on STEPs, and you're going to see how you can work it in with your daily task so that you move your organization forward, propel it forward, instead of just always getting, sucked into those day-to-day things, those little fires that come up, and you're putting them out and running from one thing to the next, and you drive home from work and you think, what did I do all day? Did I do anything that will move my organization forward? With STEPs, you can build it into your schedule so that you know that you're accomplishing things, and that your organization can articulate those accomplishments and tell the community program. And we're part of something that's nationwide. I think that's a great benefit. Larry from Green Lake wants to know if a board can complete the checklist. Absolutely. I think that STEPs is a so absolutely. Again, the section in the workbook, how to use this workbook, it talks about getting a group together, whether it's a board or a committee or just a task force, and sitting down at the table and answering the self-assessment questions. It can really help everyone to understand their role in the organization. Okay, do we have, and Tamara, I'm reading your question. You were asked to help get a group back on track after a disastrous first meeting with a consultant. Oh, that's too bad. I'm anxious to get them feeling better about their museum. What might be the easy section to build confidence? Always encourage them to choose a section that can be a good experience. They can get a success under their belt. So, you might talk with the group and see what are some of their hot button issues. Is it board terms? Is it, does it have something to do with key control of the building? Someone's trying to, pull back all the keys to the building that are out in the community. What is it that are some of the hot button issues? And then stay away from those, at least to get started. You can tackle those down the road. And I think it's important that we help, or the board role they play. It's not about judging. It's about learning and moving your group forward. The other thing is, museum standards are not meant to be punitive. Standards are a way for us to figure out how we should be operating our organizations. I always believe that standards are just the opposite of punitive. They're actually very freeing because they allow you to push away the stuff that doesn't really matter and to focus on how your organization can be the best museum or archives or library that it can be. And so I'm really sorry to hear, Tamara, that organization had that experience. And if there's anything that I can do to help, please let me know, because they were accused of doing, and then stay away from that section and let them get a success under their belt before they tackle some of the issues that might be creating some conflict. And I will say that I know that there was an organization that one of the board members told me that they had some real disagreements when they were going through StEPs, and he actually said to me that StEPs was causing them problems, and I reminded him that StEPs was not causing the problems. The problems were actually underneath the surface and had probably been there for some time. StEPs just brought them to the surface because there were, as he said to me, there were conflicts. So, sometimes we do have long-held traditions in our organizations that some people do not want to give up, and StEPs can actually be very good at helping you to get those traditions, those unhealthy or practices that really are not what museums are supposed to be doing. You can justify ending them with StEPs. Use StEPs to help you get rid of those long-held beliefs that are really not healthy for the organization. So Sharon says she has an admission to make. If you ask some of my friends and family the question about museum ethics, they would probably one more. Flora is saying that feasibility study, that StEPs will help. Absolutely. If you know of anyone who's talking about starting a museum, do recommend StEPs to them, because it can make the planning process a whole lot easier if they have guidelines to go on. Any other last questions? And TJ, I don't see anything. Did you see anything did you flag anything for me? I don't see anything over in our parking lot. Well, I want to thank all of you for joining us today and to talk more about the StEPs program. The link to the program is there on your screen, and please do give us feedback by clicking on the survey link and tell us how your experience went today. We will send all of you the link to include the list of participants. So we'll send that to everyone. Those of you who didn't get registered through the normal way, and I know, Carrie, you were one of them, and some of the others who I talked to just today or yesterday, you were having trouble registering. We don't have your email address, so if you don't get it from us in a few days, contact me or Terry Jackson at AASLH, and we'll get those links to you. So thanks, everyone, for taking part. Thank you, Terry Jackson, for helping today. I appreciate it. She was my go-to techie.